There's not enough love. There's too much hate now going all over.
Racism will stay there forever. It will take decades. It will take, I don't know how many years.
Our village was surrounded by a brook, which was red from the blood of the killed people.
Now, I know of cases where people had gone to work the morning and then come back the evening and find that the house has been demolished. And why? Because they needed to build garages for the cars of the white people.
We never thought police would open fire.
There's no guarantee for anything. It's scary, waiting any minute to be killed.
Those pictures, I never can't get out of my mind.
What crime have they committed?
So color of skin has absolutely...
There has to be an undercurrent of violence when people are denied their rights.
Happening of something awful does not decrease the possibility of repetition. On the contrary, it makes it more probable.
How come that ordinary people like you and I could become killers?
La Comisión de la Verdad y la Reconciliación, creada por Mandela y presidida por el Premio Nobel de la Paz Desmond Tutu, tuvo tres objetivos: dar a conocer las causas y los hechos de violación a los derechos humanos, identificar y reparar a las víctimas y amnistiar a quienes reconocieran voluntariamente haber participado en crímenes de lesa humanidad. Mary Barton fue elegida por Nelson Mandela para investigar las violaciones a los derechos humanos durante el apartheid. En 1995, Mary escuchó en la CONADEP sudafricana a 22.000 víctimas y unos 7.700 represores. ¿Usted forma parte de una especie de CONADEP local, de la Comisión de Reconciliación y Paz? ¿Cómo se llamaba?
De la verdad en la reconciliation.
¿Escuchó personalmente los testimonios de las víctimas?
Yes, we received more than 20,000 testimonies from victims of abuses. And it was a very moving and very tense time in South Africa.
¿La televisión sudafricana transmitió esto al público?
Yes. Yes, it was amazing. The television broadcast the public hearings, and the radio transmitted the full testimonies day after day after day in all our 11 languages. It was amazing. And I think that that is one of the successes of the Truth Commission. There are many problems with it, perhaps, but one of the successes is that it's impossible for anybody to deny what happened, because everybody was forced to listen to those stories day after day. And many white people would say, oh, I can't bear it, I'd click off the television. But you knew that they had seen enough to make them understand what had really happened.
No hay un horror más grande que otro. El horror es. El horror sucede. Sucede como una tormenta feroz, se cae encima. Y en esa tormenta desaparece el tiempo. El 26 de junio de 1986, 10 chicos de entre 12 y 18 años fueron secuestrados en Mamelodi, a 20 kilómetros de Pretoria. Los llevaron hasta la frontera con Botswana, los drogaron y les prendieron fuego dentro de un micro. El horror duró hasta que se convirtieron en ceniza. Sus restos fueron enterrados en un cementerio para indigentes y los diarios del día siguiente informaron que 10 terroristas que buscaban desestabilizar la paz habían sido detenidos por la policía. 10 madres los buscaron, temerosas de averiguar la verdad al final del camino. El fuego de aquel horror tardó 8 años en extinguirse. Recién en 1994, cuando se formó la Comisión para la Verdad y la Reconciliación, los detalles salieron a la luz. Y tuvieron que pasar otros tantos años para que las madres de Mamelodi supieran dónde estaban enterrados sus hijos.
E botlhoko ke gore he ke nagana ka apartheid gore ke nagana ka nako ela maburu a ntse a re phedisa ka teng gore a nyaka gore rena batho ba bantsho gore re phele bana ka di-slave gore the way ka mokgwa ena nyakang ka teng.
Caterina es la hermana de Thomas Philly, cuyos restos buscó durante 9 años.
Ke ntho e ka se tsogeng e lebetswe ka gore ga ke gopola maburu ntse a na le go tla gore ba re tshwenya kere nako la ge ba ka utlwa gore go na le motho o a sa nyakeng melao ya maburu ntse a na le go tla a tla le tlosa bosigo a le rage a letse a le utlwise botlhoko.
O ile a timela ka 26 tsa June 1986 a na le ba bang ba 9 ba tsamaya ka khumbi e tshweu. Driver teng ile Joe Mamasela.
María Entuli es la líder de las Madres de Mamelodi. La búsqueda le provocó una ACV y empeoró su diabetes, pero finalmente supo qué había pasado con Jeremías, su hijo de 16 años.
They were young men anyway, young youths, and they were assassinated by a strategy which really led them into an ambush situation. They became a symbol of a number of other stories similar to that. And it was only at the time of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that the truth of some of those stories came out, which was, for some people, a terrible shock because they had managed to persuade themselves that the state machinery could never have done anything like that. And now suddenly here was proof of the power and the violence of the state. Yeah.
To our fallen heroes, Ray Barthaldenes, Maurice Kabini, Jeremiah Magagula, Stephen McKenna, Abraham Makwalani, Samuel Masilela, Jeremiah Zondintuli, Thomas Phiri, Elliot Sateke, Sipo, Philip Sevanyon. My blood will nourish the tree that will bear the fruits of the freedom. Solomon Masango. O fitlhela re tlo TRC re sa submita di-statements tsa gore ba re nyakise bana.
Ke mo re thomileng go utlwa gore no batho ba ntse le banyaka bana ba ntse le banyaka a ba teng re thomile go utlwa ko TRC gore bana bale ba ba bolaile ba ba explosile ba ba bolaetse net verdient
Ba ba injecta ba fetsa ba batsape ba ba lokela ka mo khumbi. And then ka mo khumbi no hona le di tutupi tsa bona tsa ho explode khumbi.
But tsa AK47 ba thuntsha khumbi ele gore di hand grenade tsela di explode gore ntse ba bolaya motlhala di hand grenade tsela di explode gore go ska ga bona hala selo gore le nna re nyaka di remains re khone gore re ba boloke a proper burial re gore ba boloke pila and then hey tutsi stlharesego batho bana ba krile ba fele and then how tshwara skull tlhogo ntse fufure ba o letse so gore ba ire gore o molomong a tsene mo plastiking ya hae ka re ntse ba fufurega I'll be all right. I just want to cry a lot, because when we think the thing that was happened to our child, to my brother and to the another children, no, they make me. We are singing because we are going to the people that they just rest. It's our culture. It's our culture.
Mary Barton decidió pasar su cumpleaños número 80 en la prisión de Robben Island. Robben Island está a 12 kilómetros de Ciudad del Cabo. Es la isla de las focas. Fue colonia de leprosos durante un siglo y luego prisión de máxima seguridad. Como miembro de las Black Sash, una organización de mujeres blancas que peleó contra la represión de Estado, Mary visitó durante años a los presos en ese sitio. Allí estuvo Mandela. En la celda 46664 de Robben Island, Mandela pasó 18 de los 27 años de prisión. Solo podía recibir una visita y una carta cada 6 meses. Durante esos años, el preso 46664 estudió Derecho por correspondencia en la Universidad de Londres. Ahora es tiempo de intensificar la lucha en todos los frentes, dijo cuando salió, después de 10.000 días de prisión. Cuando todos temían que recrudeciera el conflicto armado, Mandela eligió el camino de la democracia. Había llegado el momento de curar las heridas. Mandela fue el primero en perdonar. El perdón es una actitud interior que no tiene nada que ver con la ley. Uno no puede obligar por la ley a perdonar, porque sería falso. ¿Cómo se llega al perdón?
And even not only forgiveness you can't legislate, but you can't legislate repentance. And many of the people who came to testify did not say they were sorry. And there were some people who were angry about that, but I think it was a good thing, because they would have just been committing perjury if they were not sorry. They felt they were soldiers, they were doing their duty, or they were police, or whatever. But where they did say sorry, there was then a sense of one believed them, because it wasn't a condition of the amnesty.
I was part of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission at the time. I'd listened to so many terrible things, terrible stories. And Eugene de Kock had, in one of the hearings, he had expressed an apology that the widows of the men he had helped to murder had received and had felt was a remorseful apology.
Pumla Godobo enseña psicología en la Universidad de Ciudad del Cabo. Trabajó en la Comisión de la Verdad y promovió el encuentro entre víctimas y victimarios. A Pumla la desvela averiguar la naturaleza del mal. Durante 46 horas entrevistó a Eugene de Kock, conocido como Prime Evil, condenado a 212 años de prisión por crímenes de lesa humanidad. Uno de los pocos condenados en Sudáfrica.
Eugene de Kock is a man who was apartheid's chief assassin, I would say. He ran a covert operations unit in one of the farms outside of Pretoria. And in fact, Eugene de Kock himself said to me he had killed so many people, he didn't even know how many people he had killed. But when this happened, when these widows of men that Eugene de Kock had helped murder responded to his plea with a forgiveness, reaching out to him with forgiveness, I was intrigued by it. And so this was the first time on the commission that we witnessed a story of people actually forgiving a perpetrator. Although we talked, about reconciliation, but we never actually imagined that there would be actual acts of forgiveness.
Cuando la búsqueda terminó por fin, las madres de Mamelodi pudieron enterrar a sus muertos en el Parque de la Libertad, en Pretoria. A aquella triste ceremonia asistieron todos los dioses. Hubo oraciones cristianas, batir de tambores, bailes y llamadas a los antepasados y a los mártires. Las madres rociaron los restos de sus hijos con agua para ahuyentar a los malos espíritus. Nunca pudieron hablar con Joe Mamacela, el autor de la emboscada, pero aceptaron que en 2006 el exministro Adrian Block les lavara los pies en señal de arrepentimiento.
Henkebe le thoya le fela ga motho a khopetse tshwarelo rena ka culture ya rena he motho a khopetse tshwarelo mo wena and then wa ha mmotsisa dipotso a o botsa answer e right
ge motho a re ntshwarele o tshwanetse re o mo tshwarelo o mmontshe gore wena and go sa mo tshwarelo o gainang ga o gaine selo mara ka mo tshwarelo o ba relieved ka mo pelong ya gago o nna o thabile.
What makes forgiveness possible is that you remember differently. You don't remember with hate, you remember differently. The women, for example, who and other people were forgiven that I've talked to over the years, they talk about how, sometimes they wake up feeling angry at this person who killed their loved one. But because they remember that moment where this person presented themselves in a remorseful way, which enabled them to understand the circumstances within which the violence was committed, that then enables them to then return to that place of forgiveness.
Fania Gottefeld vive en Nueva York y fue una víctima del Holocausto. Tenía 15 años cuando los alemanes invadieron su pueblo en Ucrania y pasó 3 años de su vida viviendo en un pozo, como Ana Frank. Un campesino polaco y un miliciano ucraniano le salvaron la vida. Escribió en 2005 El amor en un mundo de dolor, pero no perdona.
No, I cannot forgive. I'm not the one. There's a higher That's God you should forgive. I don't. Would you forgive somebody who kills your child? There was a big killing in my country, the first, only on Jewish holidays, right? First, in Sukkot, our Jewish holidays, 1942, they had an order to kill 1,500 Jews, 750. But there was a mother, our neighbor, who had 2 kids. Nobody wanted to let her into the hiding place because they were afraid that the kids will cry, jeopardize the security of all the people. She made a choice. She left the kids. She survived. When she came back, the kids were killed. Jewish babies were not killed. They were torn apart or thrown out from the window. I witnessed it. No, I will not forgive. It's for God. I will not forget, and I'm not forgiving. Would you forgive? Would you?
Quienes buscan en la tierra, buscan en realidad en su cabeza. La tierra es una excusa. Lo que quedó en la tierra son huesos, juguetes, trapos, nada. Lo que queda en la cabeza es lo que todavía molesta. Noches sin dormir, transpiración pegada a la almohada, sobresaltos, pesadillas. Cuesta sacudirse el odio. Los que buscan en la tierra buscan también una explicación. Una explicación que no existe para explicar esos momentos en que todos se vuelven locos y la muerte gobierna. Pero sin esa explicación nadie puede descansar en paz. Ni los huesos en la tierra, ni las madres en sus casas, donde quedaron sillas vacías.
Lo único que teníamos era a través de una foto aérea del año 86, el área del cementerio que se usaba. Por eso, para encontrar estos 9 que nosotras encontramos de los 10, abrimos 150 sepulturas.
Claudia Biso es arqueóloga y forma parte del equipo argentino de antropología forense. Llegó a Sudáfrica después de haber trabajado en la identificación de cadáveres en Bosnia, Croacia y Kosovo. En Sudáfrica integra el Missing Persons Task Team.
Y al grupo de madres las vi en el cementerio por primera vez. Vinieron, nos saludaron, pero después se fueron, se sentaron abajo de un árbol a esperar, a ver qué pasaba. Y nosotras íbamos, todos los días, y ellas venían todos los días. Y un día mi colega Madeleine les dice, pero no hace falta que vengan, porque también es bastante descorazonador cuando no encuentras nada. Y ella nos dice, no, pero nosotras venimos a hacerles compañía a ustedes.
Their engagement in the process meant that there was a sense of resolution in some way. Through the Truth Commission process, we had learned about their fate, how they had died. And it is a very painful and traumatic story, really quite a diabolical story, to target 10 very young teenagers, abducted under false pretenses, injected with chemicals, placed in a vehicle and burnt.
Madeleine Foulard es historiadora y dirige el equipo que busca desaparecidos en Sudáfrica.
Mourning comes about when you know completely what happened. When there are questions, uncertainties, it's very difficult to mourn. And it makes people to be stuck at the level of grief or anger and frustration. Then, it's possible then that people will tell a different story about who they are.
Pasa en la Argentina con las madres en la Argentina, 30 años después, los quieren encontrar. Y te pasa en Chipre, y te pasa en Colombia, y te pasa en América Central. Una cosa es que la persona esté muerta, otra cosa es que la persona esté desaparecida. La desaparición es la negación absoluta de la persona.
Nnete ke ntho e pila ka hobane e tla ho ntsha mo nthong o no le mo yona. Jaanong re le hutla nnete hore bana ba shwele go ile go ba bobebe mo rena because ka hobane ne re email re sa itse gore bana ba ko kae mara a health no re ya ko TRC ba bolai ba le ileng the perpetrators ba ipulela hore ba bolaile then go ile go ba bobebenyana because ra itse gore jaanong bana ba feletse kae.
Kore ntho e kang healing is only one thing. Obana ntho e kang healing le he ke ntse kore le he ke ntse ke relaxitse or ke na le bomme ba ke tsamang le bona. Ba itse ntho ka A1 ke lang ka yona always. Kore nna ntho ka healing ke gore ke bone mama sela so. Kore obana nka bonana le mama sela so ampa closure a kore ka re ke mmotsisa ampa answer ho o tshwanela ho mputsisa and so when you ask me question I answer you le yena nna le yena wa raba so.
Hay quienes dicen que en Sudáfrica hubo perdón, pero no hubo justicia. ¿Usted está de acuerdo con esto?
I do really agree, particularly now that the Truth Commission is over. When it was first proposed, I was horrified. Amnesty, never. You can't possibly have amnesty for those abuses of the past. But I came to realize that in the time of the negotiations between the different political parties, it was obvious that peace would not be reached if there wasn't some guarantee of amnesty. And so the amnesty was the price that we paid for the peace and for the peaceful outcomes of the 1994 elections when Mandela became president. What we anticipated is that where people did not take advantage of that opportunity to come and seek amnesty, or where they did come forward and ask for amnesty but did not fulfill the criteria, did not tell the whole truth, for example, that they would then be prosecuted afterwards. And that has not happened, or has happened in only one or two cases. And that is one of the, I think, failures of the Truth Commission in South Africa, of the process, that at the end of it, there was a kind of punto final, instead of proceeding from there to trials of people who had not used the opportunity, which was an opportunity for restoration and reconciliation in a reconciliatory spirit.
Cocinanti Biko es hijo de Steve Biko, asesinado por la policía en 1977, líder de la lucha contra el apartheid. Biko sufrió una lesión neurológica durante un interrogatorio y luego lo trasladaron desnudo durante 12 horas hasta Pretoria. Tenía 30 años. La familia Biko se opuso a las amnistías y al trabajo de la Comisión por la Verdad.
It is not unusual in South Africa to step into a lift and see somebody who tortured you, and tortured you immensely in the past, right? In 1977, there was an inquest into the murder of Steve Biko. And the outcome of the inquest was that nobody was to blame, right? Now, this is despite the overwhelming evidence that demonstrated that he had been tortured and he had been injured. So what then happened was that in 1997, 20 years later, the policemen who were alive, because some of them had died, applied for amnesty before the TRC. And many people who were applying for amnesty simply approached the Commission for amnesty and not with the objective of advancing reconciliation in that regard. But none of them has ever been truthful in terms of making the disclosure.
One of the other failures of the Truth Commission is that there are areas of actions by the military which were not uncovered, where there was nobody who came forward to talk about what had been done, what orders had been given, and so on.
Y toda esa parte quedó impune. O sea, todo lo que tuvo que ver con los militares quedó impune.
That's right. And their attitude seems to be, we were soldiers in a war, we were doing what we had to do, it was not political, we were simply serving the state and obeying orders.
Aka tlhoya motho nka se re ke tlhoile lekgowa, although bona ba sentse ba re tlhoile ka bane nako nngwe le re ke kopana le bana ka mo dishopong ga go be monate mara rena a re sana taba le bona re no re se se ileng se ile le go fedile le re ka ba kwatela bana ba le ba ka se boe.
The problem with death is that it is full and final. Once it happens, it's done. So nothing else that you say beyond that can remedy that situation. The loss is full and final.
La paz llegó a Sudáfrica en un estadio. Fue en Ellis Park, un campo de rugby, el deporte de los blancos. En 1995, un año después de la llegada de Mandela al poder, Sudáfrica era entonces sede del Mundial de Rugby y Mandela se reunió con François Pienaar, capitán de los Springboks, pidiéndole que hablara ante la multitud sobre la unificación nacional.
The Afrikaners are rugby crazy. Rugby was a symbol of apartheid. And if you look at Nelson Mandela's speech in 1994, when he said, "The time for the healing of wounds has come, the time to build is upon us," he meant that. And he saw that rugby is really important.
Pienaar, que era hijo de una familia africana, hizo que todo su equipo aprendiera el nuevo himno en lengua zulú. Aquel hecho fue luego película y se llamó Invictus, dirigida por Clint Eastwood.
So when 1995 came around, there was an element within the ANC that said, change the game, you know, it's got to be overhauled and so forth. And he said, no, hang on a minute. That logo, that Springbok, is incredibly important. And if we're going to heal South Africa, we need to understand that. And he stood up as a leader and he said, I want you guys to embrace this team as your team. It's unbelievable because there were a lot of people that hated the Springboks and what the Springboks stood for. And because of that, they started thinking differently. You would very rarely have heard of a black player or a colored player playing rugby. It was just unheard of. It's when I grew up later and when I started studying and learning a lot more, then I realized that there was a lot of black and colored players that played rugby, especially in the Eastern Cape. But remember, we only got television in South Africa in 1976, and so you didn't see all these things. You didn't read it in the newspaper, so it was oblivious to the fact that there are black and colored players playing rugby.
We were very divided when it comes to black and white. For argument's sake, I can remember when I had to go onto a train, we had to go on a third class where only the white people was in the first class, and obviously the black and the colored people were in the third class. And I can remember where the bus stops will say only blacks and only whites, and the toilets, for argument's sake, as well. I remember all those things. So those are the experiences I've had. I can remember how my brother has been picked up by a police van, put in the back of a car, and because they were working in a group of 3 instead of 2. So you were not allowed at a time to walk more than two guys behind to each other. And that was on our way to training sessions.
Los Springboks contaban entonces con el primer jugador de raza negra, Chester Williams. Y Nelson Mandela vistió entonces la camiseta número 6, la de Pienaar, para entregarle la copa al equipo.
Initially, some of my teammates probably didn't believe in me, but as I became a better player, or proven to them that I can actually play at that level, they started to accept me. But I think the biggest challenge for me was the spectators, is that how do you prove to another 40 million people that you actually are the best player in that position at a time?
I went to Robben Island for the first time during the World Cup in '95. We played the opening match against Australia, played it here on this field, and nobody gave us a chance because Australia were the favourites. They were undefeated. In 12 months, they haven't lost a game. So how can this team beat them? And we beat them. The next day, we went to Robben Island, and one of the most emotional things in my life was when I walked into his cell. I was the last one to walk into his cell, and I became very emotional because I could stick out my hands and touch the walls, and I looked through the bars and saw what he was looking at for 17 years when he was on the island. It was very emotional for me. Here's a person that's been in jail for 27 years because of politics. Surely he's going to be angry, when he comes out. I think I would have been very angry. But he came out and he realized, hang on a minute, there's healing to be done. There's building to be done. The world was looking at South Africa and they were thinking that there will be terrible times for South Africa because the injustices of the past, apartheid, new leadership, angry people. So they were waiting for South Africa to almost go up in smoke, and it didn't. If you look at the final, the crowd's 60,000 people, 99.9% were white supporters. And when Mandela walked onto the field, Madiba, we call him Madiba, wearing my jersey, everyone started shouting Nelson, Nelson, Nelson. People that would have not liked him and people that would have thought terrible things about him went and said, hang on a minute, he's embracing my sport. Maybe this guy is not as bad as I might have thought or people told me about.
On the day of the Springboks playing, I was driving my car, having picked up my son from school. He was still little at the time. And listening over the radio to all the applaud and the cheering and so on, I cried in my car. And my tears were tears of a sense of loss. I was happy, of course, that this was the moment, but I recognized that What I was crying about was, why was I excluded for all these years from celebrating a moment of pride from my country? This was the first time that we collectively celebrated a proud moment of South Africans as black and white. So that moment was indeed one that connected South Africans in a profound way, because here was the person who had been, who epitomized the extremes of exclusion in our society, coming to the stadium and saying, I am part of this world, I am part of this nation, and I proudly display it in my shirt. This is a symbol. Some people say, oh, these are just symbols, but symbols are very important ways of connecting people and restoring a sense of hope, you know, particularly in a country where, you know, there was just no hope of rebuilding our society in the way that Nelson Mandela was focused on rebuilding the country.
So it was a great experience to see how many people embrace each other, they're hugging each other, whatever color you were, you know, people were happy, and it is amazing to see that that South Africa has united as a nation, and I must say since then it has improved a lot, because people have accepted each other now for what they are and not for who they are.
When the whistle went, it was just amazing. You know, I was so blessed. I was really, I was incredibly blessed to have the opportunity to share the platform with Madiba, and just to show his selflessness. You know, when I walked onto the podium, and he handed me the trophy, he took out and he shook my hand and he said to me, "Francois, thank you very much for what you've done for South Africa." And I couldn't believe that he said this, because it was us that needed to thank him, and I did. I said, "Mr. Mandela, you've got it wrong. Thank you for what you've done for our country." Because if it wasn't for that, who knows? If it wasn't for him that came out of prison with forgiveness in his heart, who knows?
¿Qué significa hoy Mandela en Sudáfrica?
Mandela is now, to many white people who so vilified him in the past, a hero, a saint, a person who exemplified the spirit of reconciliation and forgiveness. And so I came to understand that in order to allow somebody who has suffered terribly to forgive, there seem to be some essential steps that have to happen. Acknowledgement, that recognition from the perpetrator that an abuse has been committed. And if on top of that, they also say they are sorry and ask for forgiveness, that seems to be another step forward. And somehow when those conditions are met, people are amazing. They find it in their hearts to reach out to the perpetrator. And some of the most incredible moments in the Truth Commission came about when that happened. They are very celebrated, they were very few, but they act as an example and also a kind of vicarious way for the society to forgive itself, to establish the conditions for living together in harmony.
You're not born with hatred in your heart. Children are pure, you know. It's what they are being taught. I think that's where it comes from, because when you're born, you don't hate anything. You don't hate anybody.
People wanted to be heard, to be recognized. Now I know who killed my loved one. Now I can wake up in the morning and begin the process of mourning.
It would be giving too much power to the people that are responsible for the tortures, jail, and the deaths, were we to live in that space of hatred.
Los muertos de Sudáfrica empezaron a descansar en paz. En paz, no en olvido, porque víctimas y victimarios se enfrentaron al perdón que los puso a prueba. No podemos vivir pensando en el Holocausto todo el tiempo, pero tampoco podemos vivir como si nunca hubiera existido, dijo alguna vez el cazador de nazis Simon Wiesenthal. El odio vive agazapado en algún lugar de la conciencia, esperando el momento de volver a ponernos a prueba.